Hello, scholars. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about issues of difference, difference and diversity. A lot of times, people will use those terms as if they're synonyms, diversity and difference, and they certainly are related. And yet, can I really be diverse or different by myself? It's always in relation to someone or some group other than myself and my group, right? That's how I become different. If everybody in the group was exactly in my image, we'd have no difference, we'd have no diversity, right? So it's possible that you might be thinking that I'm overthinking this issue of diversity and difference. But I'd like to share with you a brief activity today to kind of go through how differences are actually manifestations of power relationships and why differences matter. When we talk about differences and diversity, I feel more comfortable using the term differences because differences captures that unequal power relationship that is enacted when differences are produced. And I'll talk about that in a minute. When we use the term diversity, it tends to be this kind of isolated essence that's in people, like the diversity of women, for example. Women tend to be like this, they cry a lot. And you might say, well, that's kind of my experience and my understanding. Women will cry a lot. And so it might be a stereotype, but that's the way women are. And you might have intra-group differences where there's differences within the group, but there's definitely that some of the people in that group of women do cry a lot. So you might say that it's about that. But I would like to suggest that diversity is a way of thinking about people's characters as if they're these static essences, like a sense of womanness, manness, being Native American, being Black. That those are categories that are essences within people. And I think over time, we see that essences are not stable, that they don't actually exist, that they're always shifting over time. And so what it means to be a woman in our time is maybe different than it was during the Revolutionary War era of the United States. And of course, time has passed by, roles are different and so on, but it does show you that these supposed essences of what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a person of color, and so on, they're not necessarily stable things within the group that we're born with, but things that emerge out of relationships. Now, why does this matter? It matters because differences make a difference. That can be good and it can be bad. When difference makes a difference, all you have to do is look at Driving While Black and to know that difference makes a difference. And in this case, your life is definitely in your hands when you're going out and driving while Black. Okay, so things like being a woman and going to work, women still make some sense less on the dollar than men do and are still breaking glass ceilings in certain professions. So difference does make a difference. So what we want to talk about today is how are those differences produced? So to do that, I would like to go to my One of my favorite people, even though he wasn't always very good uh, with how he interacted with women. I feel like he was murdered quite young, and he may have learned a little bit as we all grow and develop. Malcolm X was that way too, where he was murdered quite young, and perhaps he could have learned other things as well. So I'm going to share with you, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to share with you a quote from Malcolm X. Okay. And so this is Malcolm X, and he's talking about differences. He says, victims of racism are created in the image of racists. When the victims struggle vigorously to protect themselves from the violence of others, they are made to appear in the image of criminals, as the criminal image is projected onto the victim. Okay, let me just give you a moment to just digest that. The victims of racism, so those who are targeted by racism, and we could exchange that and say sexism, we could say ageism, there's classism. We could go through the line of isms and suggest that those people who are targets of the ism, they are made in the image of those who are in the group that controls that particular social structure. Okay. And then when they fight back, they almost reinforce. So if maybe the idea is that there's a stereotype, for example, about Black women, and you hear it these days. Right now, at the time I'm recording this, President Biden in the United States is working on the task of nominating the first Black woman to the Supreme Court. So you hear a lot of talk about Black women in the media. And so some of the stereotypes come up about Black women in particular, but women of color being kind of too quick to speak back, very argumentative, and so on. So when people do try to protect themselves, they are kind of reinforcing, I thought you were smart-mouthed and had no home training, and now I know for sure that you don't, when indeed they may be trying to protect their sense of self, their sense of dignity, and so on. So in this way, as they are targeted by oppression and domination, then they fight back, and this is the image put on them. That homeless people are dirty all the time, that Southerners are slow and not intellectually bright because of the way that they speak with that Southern drawl. There's all kinds of stereotypes that are associated with these things. So we're going to come back to what Malcolm X has said and see if we can understand that a little bit better as we look at another scenario. Now, this story that I want to share with you is about two groups of people. And it's very important that you keep the two groups of people clear in your minds, okay? Now, this story is taken from the Judeo-Christian tradition of about 3,000 years before the birth of Christ, BC. And the two groups involved here are the Amorites and the Sumerians. Okay, and now these two groups of people, the Amorites and the Sumerians, did not have good relations between them. Okay, so what I want you to think about here is that the Sumerians are the professionals, okay? And they are the ones who are the doctors. The Sumerians are the teachers. The Sumerians are the pilots. The Sumerians are the dentists. They are the ones that live in the upper class neighborhoods. They're the PTA presidents. They are the governor's office is from there. So basically, the Sumerians are the middle and upper class people. They're the dominant society. They're the primary English speakers. They are the ones with the income. They are widely represented in society. They control what is considered good, true, and beautiful, and access to resources by and large. Okay, now the Amorites, on the other hand, these are your racialized minorities. These are your indigenous peoples. These are your working class people who might be, to use pejorative language, they might be seen as, quote, trailer trash if they're white. The Amorites are the economic refugees coming across the border without documentation, so they're, quote, illegal. Okay, so do you see where we are? Where the Amorites are the lower status groups that have less ability to control society, and the Sumerians are the more mainstream society of US society. Now, as your professor and as a teacher, I am a Sumerian, and you all are my students, and or maybe my clients. Maybe you're the parents I'm working with. I'm a social worker, so I am interacting with you. Okay, so I'm a Sumerian, I'm a professional, and I'm talking with my colleagues, and I'm talking about you, the Amorites. And what I'm telling my colleagues as we're having coffee together or a break together, and we're doing a lot of shop talk, I'm talking about the Amorites. Okay, so this is me, a Sumerian, talking about the Amorites, which is you. Okay, so I say, a tent dweller buffeted by wind and rain. He knows not prayers. With the weapon, he makes the mountain his habitation. Contentious to excess, he turns against the land, knows not to bend the knee, eats uncooked meat, has no house in his lifetime, is not brought to burial when he dies. Okay, think about that for a minute. What kind of an image does it bring to your mind? A tent dweller buffeted by wind and rain. He knows not prayers. With the weapon, he makes the mountain his habitation. Contentious to excess, he turns against the land, knows not to bend the knee, eats uncooked meat, has no house in his lifetime, is not brought to burial when he dies. Now, I'm looking out at you as the Amorites, and I'm describing you and your culture and your group of people. Do you think that I have a very good feeling about you? Do you feel like I understand, recognize, and respect you and your people? Probably not, right? Almost always, whenever people hear this little story, the first word that they think of is the word savage. And I say, well, where did you get that word savage? On nowhere on this screen does it say the word savage. But that's an excellent word to use because it definitely comes out of the imagery of the words that I have chosen as a Sumerian describing the Amorites, right? So now you're starting to see how differences are created. Okay, so remember, I'm the professional, I'm the police officer, I'm the social worker, I'm the attorney, I'm the classroom teacher, I'm the doctor, I'm the nurse. I have institutional authority. And so when I say something about your group, people are more likely to listen to me and I make decisions in my institution. Where you, on the other hand, you're coming to me for services. Maybe you have to work with me because it's court ordered. Maybe your child was taken out of your home by someone in my group. So as we're interacting, my group, the Sumerians, we have more institutional authority than you do. Um, so as a group. So let's take a look now and see, whenever we are describing the quote other, we're actually learning more about ourselves. Okay. Now I'm a researcher in real life. So I had to learn this lesson carefully, because what researchers do is they go out and they're like looking out at the world. Well, everything that I see is filtered through my eyes, through my experiences, through my body, through what my life has been like. That's how I make sense of the world that I'm seeing. Okay. So therefore, when I'm doing my research and I'm looking out, I'm a social scientist, I'm an applied sociologist. So, and a teacher educator, when I look out at the world and I see classrooms, I see families, I see communities, when I'm looking at the other, it's being filtered through me and my cultural lenses and my background. So a very important thing here in understanding social differences is that when I'm looking at the other, I'm learning more about myself than I am about those I'm supposedly researching. So I have to keep that in mind. Now, how is that possible? I'm looking at you, but I'm learning more about me. Isn't that contradictory? Let me see if I can help you see it. Okay, so let's go back to our story. A tent dweller buffeted by wind and rain, he knows not prayers. Okay, so by me telling you, me as a Sumerian telling you that those Amorites, they live in tents and they're just out there in the wind and rain. How does that tell you more about me and my value system? I'm describing them, but I'm actually telling you more and learning more about me. What is my value system? A tent dweller buffeted by wind and rain. Well, I clearly don't live in a tent. So what's normal for me is not a tent. Okay. No, I probably am living in the city. I have maybe a brick home. It is not a tent. It is definitely not a tent. A tent buffeted by wind and rain. That's sounding very, it could be maybe like wilderness survival or something, but it's definitely not me. So I'm describing the other, and the other is not me. And the way I know it, that stands out to me is because I live in a house. I'm naming what that difference is. So my own normal is not a tent. So what is not a tent? Yeah. Okay, let's go on. He knows not prayers. Now, how does that tell you more about me as a Sumerian than it does about the Amorites? Well, there's many ways to pray, right? We have many different religious groups, various forms of organized religion. I can think of, the major bodies of Christianity, Islam, uh, Judah, so there's plenty of different traditions that are very old in the world. There's many ways to pray, and many of them don't even fit in those main categories, right? So some people might say, I fold my arms when I pray. Other people might be making the sign of the cross. I'm Catholic, so that's what we do. Other people may bow. There's all kinds of ways that people pray, right? So when it says he knows not prayers, first of all, that's telling you more about me, because it tells you I do value prayers. And when I'm using my cultural lenses and I look out at you as the Amorites, I'm not seeing prayers. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't pray. It's just that I don't see it as prayer, because your praying doesn't match my praying. And at the same time, what if you really don't pray? That's my value system. Maybe you just think, well, that's just some, foolishness. And so, but because I'm more in the mainstream, and what I say has more institutional authority, that I say he knows not prayers. I put a value on prayer, and no prayer becomes a problem. But it's only a problem because I say so. Because is it a problem for you? No, right? So you might say, I don't need prayer. That's for you, but when mine is the higher power system, then yours becomes deviant. So we have two things going on here. We learn more about me, that I value prayer, because I said, he knows not prayers. I value prayers. So it's either that I don't see you as praying because I don't recognize what you're doing as prayer because it doesn't look like mine, or maybe you really don't. And then I also find that problematic. So I devalue that about you. And you're not able to speak back. And if you do speak back, I might be saying, I knew it, you're kind of a heretic, So that's what Malcolm X was talking about. So let's go on and see a little bit more as we're learning about how differences function in relationships of power, and how when I'm studying the other, I'm really learning more about myself than about the other. Okay, with the weapon, he makes the mountain his habitation. Okay, what do we know about that? With the weapon, he makes his habitation. So the unspoken is what's normal. So I'm operating, as I'm describing you, Amorites, I'm operating on what the norms are for the Sumerians. So you're out there, in your tent on the mountain, and you've got weapons. And so, this all kind of adds up to the image of savage, doesn't it? And so, I clearly don't live on the mountain. Okay, because I pointed that out about you. And so the lower class people must live up in the mountains. The more upper class people from the mainstream, we probably live in the valleys. Okay, so with the weapon, so you're using tools and things like that. You're out there on the side of the mountain. That's clearly not what we do. We probably have much more so-called sophisticated things in the valley. Okay, so I'm learning more about you. I'm describing you, but I'm learning more about me. Knows not to bend the knee. Okay, well, so it looks like I am telling you that you Amorites don't seem to know how to be respectful. You don't bow the knee. You just seem to be going about your business and not paying attention to rules or whatever. And so I'm filtering you through my own lens that I see in our society, what's being respectful. So maybe it's that you don't think that what we do in the mainstream is respectful for you, and you just refuse to do it. Whatever it is, I'm seeing you as knows not to bend the knee. I'm seeing you as very stubborn and hard to get along with, and not particularly respectful. Okay, eat uncooked meat. Are you starting to see the pattern here? So I'm looking at you and I can go over to your tent area, to your tent city, and I can see, yep, I can see empirically that there's a whole bunch of people that are eating meat that has not been put on the fire. Now, how does that tell you more about me than it does about you with your uncooked meat? It tells you, right, that I value cooked meat, that I think that that's a priority. Whatever your reasons for having uncooked meat, I don't I don't value that. I don't see that. I don't need that. And I am describing you using my value system. And my value system says that you need to cook your meat and you don't. Therefore, you become different, diverse, and you are deviant. Okay. So we start seeing how that works. Has no house in his lifetime. Again, how does this tell you more about me than it does about you? You don't have a house in your lifetime because probably what do? You pick up your tent and you move it around. That would be my guess since you have no house in your lifetime. So what are my value systems? I probably don't. I'm probably not someone who goes through various areas of the region or nations or um, terrain. I built my house and it's staying on the city block and that's where it is. So I'm not nomadic at all. So has no house in his lifetime. I'm noticing that and marking that as different from my own unspoken norms of what I value. Do you see how those unspoken norms work? So I'm only pronouncing the differences, but those differences become manifest because they're being marked against what I value and what my norms are. Is not brought to burial when he dies. Okay, now this just tells you, right, the whole idea of being, quote, savage. This sounds very animalistic, doesn't it? Just someone lost a calf in the herd and oh, well, the herd keeps moving, right? Is this really possible? Is not brought to burial when he dies. Okay, we're talking about a group, not the whole, not a one-time incident. Okay, so as I'm telling you that, and I'm saying, I'm a Sumerian and I am describing you, the Amorites, is not brought to burial when he dies. So what do? Somebody in the family dies and they just, they're nomadic, so just leave them there and keep on moving. That's highly unlikely, right? So it could be that this is telling you more about me than about them because I probably don't know when I'm looking at it and I see is not brought to burial when he dies. I don't see what I consider to be burial. And therefore I say, well, it's not there. You don't do it like I do. And so therefore it must not exist. So my value system is on you and yours. Okay. So when I am telling you about the other, and in this case, it's the Amorites, then I am telling you actually more about myself and my unspoken values that I'm operating from and making decisions and speaking to you about you. I notice them because of my own value system. Now, excuse me. Now let's go back to the fact that I'm the teacher, I'm the police officer, I'm the doctor, I'm the social worker. So I'm a professional in society. And I have, even though I never said that you're savages from the Amorite community, I clearly have a negative view of you. You don't pray, you're not good with climate change and an environmentalist. You maybe you don't recycle like I feel like you should. You seem not to get along with people. So overall, you Amorites, you just are a quote problem. And so, but remember, I'm the police officer. So, or I'm the school teacher. I am a professional. So as I interact with you, how do you feel like our relationships are going to go? How do you think that I'm going to feel about you and interact with you and make decisions about you? And how are you going to feel, if I just kind of treat you as an I it instead of an I thou relationship? You might get the hairs on the back of your neck up, and you might come across to me as contentious, because you're like, nobody talks to me like that. Don't talk to me like I'm some child, or whatever it may be. You may get upset with me because I might, not be as respectful to you as I should be, because I've got this negative image that adds up to savage for you. So we do see that when we see that we have whole groups of populations. For example, in education in the United States, school teachers are overwhelmingly white. Teaching and teacher education is a white world. That is like over 85% white. Okay. But at the same time, the school children, the student population is increasingly not white. They're from these racialized, marginalized, historically disenfranchised groups. That's who's in school. So you have these different, the Amorites and the Sumerians are, some are the Sumerians are the teachers, the Amorites are the students. So you can see sometimes, where do we get this school to prison pipeline? It's not really surprising, not because we have bad teachers or bad students and bad parents and bad communities, but because there's a lot of disconnect with how they're coming together. So this is why it's so important. If I am the professional, I'm the Sumerian, and I'm working with people who are from the Amorite group, whatever they may be in today's terms, then I can think about that and I can say, what is it about my value system am I putting on them? Can I be a little bit open? Can I understand that this is my value system, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that it's theirs? What might be happening that we're not kind of connecting, and in this I thou relationship instead of an I it relationship. And an I it relationship can happen quickly, even in the same conversation, where we might start out in a conversation or an interaction, and I'm all about the I thou as I interact with you, but somehow you just stepped on my toes, and suddenly I remember the buck stops here. It's me that gives the class grade at the end of the semester, whatever, and I suddenly slip into the I it as I'm interacting with you. So I, as the one who has more institutional authority, then I have to be the one to be very, very responsible with how I interact with people from the other group, because they're much more vulnerable than I am, even though maybe my feelings might get hurt. So diversity and difference are about these relationships of power. If everybody was in the situation where they eat uncooked meat, that's not diverse. That's not different. It only becomes different in relation to a particular norm that's seen as the way to do it. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And if you were actually in the room with me right now, we could look at a video and look at some situations where you have professionals walking through and interacting with communities and community members who are like today's Amorites, and practice catching how their own lens ends up producing these differences that make a difference. and how they act on them. So it takes a little bit of practice to do it, but if you understand that relationship between the normative standards and who gets to decide that, and how difference is marked and produced, and who says it is, and why people might fight back on it. Now you get a sense of why Malcolm X was saying that people will fight back against this being put in the image of the racist, and they will fight back against it and have that violence put on them. And either way, it's kind of a losing situation. If they fight back, then it's like, oh, I knew you were contentious. I knew you wouldn't follow the law and so on. I knew you didn't care about education. But if you don't fight back, then they continue to run you over too. So it goes back to this idea about being dream keepers and dream wreckers. You know, when you are in a position of authority, particularly with you are distributing access to valued resources, be they education, be they goods, opportunities, whatever it is that society says is valued, and you are one of the people who says, yes, you may have some, no, you may not, you may move forward, you may not. You are in a position where you deeply impact people's lives. And it's very important that you understand how differences are constructed and why differences do make a difference, for better or for worse. Okay. Well, thank you for listening. I've enjoyed having you.